petitions, statements by ministers and junior ministers. The first statement comes from the Honorable Colonel Birch. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I will be reading the statement for Minister Birch.
Continues, Minister.
Okay. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I would like to provide this Honorable House with a report on the now critical status of the Times Bay waste-to-energy facility, what it means to us as a community, and what the government is currently doing about it. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Times Bay facility, located on Palmetto Road in Devonshire, is a mass burn waste-to-energy plant which combusts refuse and produces high-pressure steam for power production, generating some 125,000 kilowatt hours per day. Most of that power is sold into the Belco power grid, but about a third of it is utilized internally. Both the power plant itself, as well as the Times Bay seawater reverse osmosis plant next door, which produces some 750,000 gallons of fresh water per day, all from renewable energy. Mr. Deputy Speaker, you will recall that due to the synergistic relationship with the reverse osmosis plant, Times Bay was mentioned as an integral part of the water and wastewater master plan. This plan will see Times Bay repurposed as a renewable energy hub for a combined waste and water utility that will treat sewage and produce both potable and non-potable water with garbage as its primary energy source. We have high hopes for the success of this project, as it will create a number of environmental benefits for the island, as well as provide new opportunities for creative financing for the government. But while this plan will provide for the future, we unfortunately still have to deal with the here and now. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Waste and Water Master Plan remains the long-term solution for Times Bay and the water and wastewater infrastructure in general. But unfortunately, time has caught up with us, and the plan is currently state now requires swift action, even ahead of the Waste and Water Master Plan. Many of you may recall that the plant is now over 25 years old and has undergone one major refurbishment some 10 years ago. While this investment has prolonged the life of the plant, there are now components that are reaching the end of their useful life, with full replacement being the only option. This means a total plant upgrade, which will span some 3 to 5 years, needs to start now. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is truly hard to depict the true value of the service Times Bay provides to our community. While many focus on the collection and sometimes non-collection of our garbage, few are fully aware of what happens to their garbage once it leaves our curbside week in and week out by the dedicated collection teams. To many, it just magically disappears. But to the engineers, technicians, and skilled personnel who work at Times Bay, it is a constant battle to process the never-ending stream of garbage, which arrives at a rate of some 200 to 300 tons per day. If not for Times Bay, that same garbage would find itself either destroying what's left of Pembroke Marsh in the form of an unengineered landfill, or festering on our curbsides and being burned in trash barrels like we used to do decades ago. This will result in an increase in the rodent population that no one wants to see. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is certainly not the Bermuda we wish to return to, and thus it should be somewhat sobering to hear that with the current state of the plant, we will return to these conditions at any time if we do nothing. While I have painted a bleak outlook of the present reality, and it is indeed reality, I also wish to ensure the public that this government has chosen to face this reality head on and has already approved the go-ahead of a full refurbishment of the facility ahead of the Waste and Water Master Plan. Times Bay is simply too important a service to let fail, and while there will be years of hard work to arrive at a final solution, I can assure you that work towards that final solution has already begun. Mr. Speaker, I will continue to give updates of this work as it unfolds, and will keep the public abreast of our challenges, solutions, and inevitable successes. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. You have another statement, Minister? Bermuda College.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this morning I rise before this Honorable House to lay the 2020 audited financial statement for the Bermuda College as stipulated in Section 8 of the Bermuda College Act 1974. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am pleased to report that the 2020 audited statements are unqualified, and as such, in the opinion of the Auditor General, the statements present fairly the financial position of the Bermuda College as at March 31st, 2020, and the results of its operations, changes in its net assets and cash flows. The financial statements indicate that Bermuda College had assets worth $22,535,958 and total liabilities of $18,236,334. Additionally, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it should be noted that the Bermuda College currently has no long-term debt. Cash and cash equivalents for the fiscal period decreased by 10.7% to $104,426. The accounts receivable increased by 22.3% to $1,062,359, and the accounts payable increased by 9.8% and stood at $2,957,052 at the end of the 2020 fiscal year. Mr. Speaker, the net book value of capital assets as of March 31st, 2020 was $15,555,788, down 6.6% or $1,093,366 from last year's total. With the Bermuda College Foundation now functioning, it is anticipated that the college's asset base and associated depreciation will increase over time. Mr. Deputy Speaker, during the fiscal year ended March 31st, 2020, government operational grant increased by $125,000, while other revenues increased marginally by $13,570. However, during the same period, academic services and administration expenses and public relations increased by $622,690, resulting in a deficit of $483,616 at the end of the 2020 fiscal year. Mr. Deputy Speaker, during the past several years, Bermuda College and the Office of the Auditor General have worked assiduously to get the college's audits up to date in order for the Bermuda College to comply with the financial standards of its accreditors. Last year, with the tabling of the 2018 and 2019 audited statements, all outstanding audits for Bermuda College were completed, and with the tabling of the 2020 audited financial statements, Bermuda College's audits are all up to date. Mr. Deputy Speaker, looking ahead, the audited file for the year ended March 31st, 2021 is currently with the Office of the Auditor General, and the audit is scheduled to begin planning meetings scheduled for July 16th, 2021. The audit is expected to be completed by September 30th, 2021, as per the Bermuda College Act. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in closing, acknowledgement and thanks given to the former Auditor General, Ms. Heather Jacobs-Matthews, the current Auditor General, Ms. Heather Thomas, and the team at the Office of the Auditor General for their efforts in helping bring Bermuda College up to date with its audits. Thanks is also extended to the faculty and staff at Bermuda College under the leadership of President Dr. Duranda Green for their support and continued commitment to deliver quality tertiary education to a broad community. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Minister Raban, you have another statement.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this government promised that we would finally be the government that took education reform seriously. If there is one thing we can all agree, it should be that our decisions around education must always consider what is best for our children today and for future generations. Over the past 4 years, we have set about bringing real and tangible education reform to provide an education system that puts our children first and prepares them for 21st century opportunities within an equitable and sustainable system. Our children must be educated to lead personally and professionally, compete locally, and contribute globally. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this morning I rise to share with my honorable colleagues the decisions around the Parish primary school proposal. Last night, I announced that the Bermuda public school system would move forward with Parish primary schools. This plan will see one Parish primary school per parish, with 2 primary schools in Pembroke, for a total of 10 primary schools, 8 less than the 18 primary schools we currently use. Mr. Deputy Speaker, if there has been one consistent cry from the people of Bermuda about education, it has been said time and time again that the decisions around education need to be free of political influence, and decisions should be more about what is best for our children. In fact, on Tuesday, I accepted a petition supporting the retention of a particular school by 4 gentlemen from Sands. I was struck by one of their comments, which they implored to me, and I quote, "Do not make this decision based on politics. Our children lose out when that is done." Mr. Speaker, we used well thought out and defined criteria that identified the best existing school site in each parish that could be redeveloped or rebuilt into the primary school of the future. One that will provide the required facility to complement the current work being done to redesign how teachers teach and how children learn, the revising of the curriculum, and the creating of an equitable system, and to achieve the vision of primary schools that exist of and for the parish and the community. Mr. Speaker, we have been hard at work since January 2020, preparing the proposal for parish primary schools and thinking deeply of how best to engage the public in a robust and meaningful consultation on the proposals. Starting from the consultation document released in December 2020, followed by 24 Zoom meetings with internal and external stakeholders, we spent a lot of time engaging with and listening to the public and their thoughts about the parish primary school proposal. The engagement sessions, starting in January 2021, have led us to today, July 2021, and the decisions that were announced last night. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the engagement sessions garnered 121 written submissions, 434 individual questions, and over 1,000 signatories. After the originally scheduled engagement sessions, further sessions were conducted with representatives of St. George's and the Sands communities. As a result, there was a change in the proposal for Devonshire Parish, based on the alternatives provided during the consultation sessions. This level of engagement is a testament to the importance of this decision, not just for Bermuda's children today, but for honoring the past and, importantly, our future generations. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the decision to have parish primary schools was solely based on the best possible sites currently being used within each parish. This was a process that was fair, equitable, transparent, and robust. As a result of this process, the following sites are to be redeveloped as parish primary schools. In St. George's, the East End Primary School site. In Hamilton Parish, the Francis Patton Primary School site. In Smith's Parish, the Harrington Sound Primary School site. In Devonshire Parish, the Elliott Primary School site. In Pembroke Parish, the Victor Scott Primary School site and the West Pembroke Primary School site. In Paget Parish, the Paget Primary School site. In Ward Parish, the Purvis Primary School site. Southampton Parish, the Dalton E. Tucker Primary School site, and finally, in Sands Parish, the Somerset Primary School site. In addition to the above, the Prospect Primary School site will be repurposed as an exceptionality signature school. As a result, Mr. Deputy Speaker, schools not named above will eventually be discontinued to be used as primary schools. Mr. Deputy Speaker, to be crystal clear, I want to assure parents, educators, and alumni that the decisions on parish primary schools will not have an immediate effect. There will be no closures of any primary schools this school year or the next school year. These eventual discontinuing use of any schools will be phased in over a period of no less than 5 years, starting after the 2022-23 school year.
I'm sorry.
And more specifically, between the years 2023 and 2027. In a few months, a project and program management firm will be secured and a supporting team created to develop a specific plan with transitioning away from the primary schools that will no longer be used. This will be anchored by a capital works project and financing money. These eventual changes will be challenging for many. We are acutely aware of the need to handle student and staff transitions throughout this process with care. We will engage and involve those directly affected and will share regular progress updates and implementation plans throughout the process. Mr. Deputy Speaker, decisions like these are not taken lightly and without considerable thought behind it. As previously mentioned, we had a robust and meaningful consultation process in which the public was afforded the opportunity to express their opinions and provide alternatives to the proposals. I am fully aware that today's decision, while being welcomed by some in our communities, will displease others. I can state with confidence that throughout the consultation, the majority of those engaged agreed and endorsed the direction education reform was headed. But not all agreed with the proposed school sites. Again, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I reiterate that we must always make decisions around school reform with our children's best interests in mind. This must and always should be our guiding principle. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this process has been hard for some communities. That is, the parishes with multiple schools. While for others, it has not. The parishes with one primary school. However, from St. George's to Sam, we are asking our entire country to put the needs of our children first. Some communities will see neighborhood schools that have stood for generations eventually discontinue to be used, and that pain is not lost on me. Mr. Speaker, I have been open and transparent to everyone who has called, WhatsApped, emailed, or spoken to me face to face that our decisions have to be based on what is best for our children and free from political pressure. I realize having this approach has not been received with open arms in our community. There is no secret that there have been some in the SANS community that have been quite vocal in their opposition to the proposal that had the current Somerset Primary Lagoon preschool site as the best site in SANS to be redeveloped. Mr. Speaker, by way of some explanation, the West End Primary School has a very powerful 150-year history, and I am ever grateful for the numerous documents that I have received detailing that rich and powerful history. A history that has unfortunately been rooted in a racial discrimination that has seen one school favored over another in the past based on reasons of race. While this is a critical legacy that must be recognized, I have mentioned on many occasions our process focused on the sites of current schools and which is best suited for redevelopment for our children. I have, and I am sure my fellow MPs have already been inundated with messages from members of the public once the announcement that the decision would be made public on Thursday evening went live. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Bermuda Progressive Labour Party was born out of the auspices of fighting the intolerable legacy of discrimination to ensure all Bermudians are treated fairly and equal, as well as given opportunities to succeed regardless of the color of their skin. Despite many of us in the Progressive Labour Party sharing and being subject to the same history and legacy, we have decided that this decision must be depoliticized. It does not mean dismissing the past. It is about privileging Bermuda's children's future. I draw colleagues' attention to the law of origin that states that a school must be student-centered. This is a simple yet all-encompassing fact inherent in the reason for the creation and existence of schools, and therefore inherent in the school's work. We must always follow that one guiding principle when it comes to education, which is always do what's best for our children. Mr. Speaker, throughout the consultation process, I have personally been moved by the level of passion and reverence our communities have shown for the schools within their parish. In SANS especially, I have been reminded of the disgusting history of racism and segregation forced on our people that has led to unhealed trauma and pain that exists today. It is a shameful past that still lives within a certain segment of that community. However, as unsightly as it is a rich history that we must honor in a meaningful way. On the other hand, there is a segment of the same community that is fully behind proposals, as they see this as a means to finally achieve the equitable and fair system our forefathers fought for. These are real feelings felt by all, and are not lost on me as the Minister of Education. I fully understand the resulting huge burden of making a decision that places our children's best possible chance to succeed before political pressure. Mr. Speaker, we have to, we must, and we will honor the legacy, history, and culture of our schools, specifically our schools that provided our Black children with opportunities when the system of the day refused to do so. To this end, we recognize and celebrate our history and will create a historical legacy committee. The idea of this committee is to determine the best way to document, record, and share this rich history, not only to preserve it for future generations, but to help communities understand and cope with this intergenerational trauma and pain that still exists today within our communities as a result. Work towards the Historical Legacy Commission has already begun, and further updates will be provided in due course. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the first step is to create a national framework within which ideas and proposals from members of our community be developed, implemented, and shared with schools in the community. Some examples, as suggested from the consultation process, may include digitize oral histories, publish written histories of primary schools, visual historical timelines, homecoming celebrations, permanent historical exhibits in parish primary schools, potential renaming of some parish primary schools, and the rewriting of curriculum to include school and education history. I have heard and I deeply understand the prospects of discontinuing the use of some schools, including those with rich histories and legacies. This is a very difficult and painful process for many community elders, alumni, parents, and students, and I acknowledge it. Mr. Speaker, I am, however, heartened by the consistent thread throughout all of the information provided on the importance of history and legacy. It comes back to the guiding principle that all children should have an equitable, high quality, world-class education. History teaches us many lessons, and that we need to do better for each and every one of our children is one that we have learned, and as a result of this process, we are working to realize. Today, we stand at the cusp of a life-altering decision for our children, a decision that will chart the next chapter in the history of public education in Bermuda for generations to come. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we are not simply deciding to discontinue using schools because it's something to do. We are opening new schools on sites that have been judged to be the best possible site per parish. While we refer to these sites by the names of schools that currently occupy that space, there is no reason why renaming schools to reflect the progress and growth we as a country have made over the last 50 plus years should not be considered. In fact, in some cases, this should be considered mandatory. Our history in Bermuda, especially education, has been filled with examples of deliberate and purposeful exclusion of certain segments of society, mostly Black children, to our country's detriment. We will start the process of writing a new chapter and creating new memories for our children and future generations to look back upon fondly. A future which any child, regardless of who they are able to best succeed. Time will heal all wounds, but only if we allow them to be healed. Mr. Speaker, in the year 2021, in a nation as proud as ours, in an island as small as ours, with so many assets in human capital and the political will of the government, and holding our aspirations for young people close to our heart, I ask Bermuda, why should each and every child of Bermuda receive a world-class education? When it comes to education, leadership is not about the next election. It is about the next generation. It is time for us to walk the walk and not just talk the talk about education reform. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Before I go to the next speaker, we haven't seen anybody indicating that they want to ask questions at this point. So just putting it out there. The next speaker is the statement is from the Minister of Transport, Mr. Scott. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the 7th of May, 2021, I advised this Honorable House of the payments being made as set out in the project agreement between Skyport and the Bermuda Airport Authority. I wish to provide the House with an update on the latest MRG payment made to Skyport earlier this week. Mr. Speaker, on July 9th, Skyport provided the Airport Authority with a formal notice of the shortfall between the actual airport regulated revenues collected for the period from the 1st of April to the 30th of June 2021, and the guaranteed minimum regulated revenue for the same period, which was an amount totaling $7,579,778.10. Mr. Speaker, earlier this year, I advised the House that the project agreement contains a predetermined payment schedule of the MRG amounts for each calendar quarter of the 30-year contract. The government has honored all of its obligations in this regard, including making this latest MRG payment of $7,579,778.10 to Skyport. Mr. Speaker, to date, we have made 4 MRG payments to Skyport totaling $32,772,548.48. We received a contractual reimbursement at the end of 2020 in the sum of $4,195,088.04. And therefore, to date, we have made net MRG payments to Skyport totaling $28,577,460.44. We expect to make additional MRG payments in 2021. However, we do not have estimated amounts at this time. Mr. Speaker, the Bermuda Airport Authority continues to do an excellent job in managing this complex matter as part of its oversight responsibilities. The Bermuda Airport Authority has met and continues to meet all of its contractual obligations relating to the MRG payments. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister Scott. The next Minister statement is from the Ministry of Social Development and Seniors Project. The Honorable Member Janae Ferbert, you have the floor, Ms. Ferbert.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Morning.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to update this Honorable House on the important project work that is being undertaken by the Ministry of Social Development and Seniors. Mr. Speaker, I will provide updates on the extension of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities to Bermuda, the Children's Commission, Litigation Guardians, Independent Living, a senior strategy, assisting the homelessness, and engaging with the third sector. Mr. Speaker, this Honorable House will recall that the Ministry of Social Development and Seniors was created on the 9th of October 2020. The ministry comprises of the Department of Child and Family Services, Aging and Disability Services, the K. Margaret Carter Center, and also has responsibility for Human Rights Commission and charities. Mr. Speaker, the 2020 throne speech stated that this government would seek the extension to Bermuda of the UN Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities, reaffirming that all persons, irrespective of their type of disability, must enjoy fundamental human rights and freedoms. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to inform that technical officers have conducted a thorough review of the necessary articles of the convention to determine Bermuda's current compliance and what is required to meet full compliance. It should be noted that compliance is island-wide and not limited to government departments and services. The good news is that Bermuda is compliant in many areas, but there is still much work to be done. Mr. Speaker, I will provide further updates as this initiative progresses. Mr. Speaker, the 2020 throne speech also advises that this government would replace the Child Care Placement Board with a Children's Commission, whose remit would be to advocate for the children in care, promote best practice, policy, programs, and services responses to meet their needs. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to inform that we have conducted a review of the role of the Children's Commission in other jurisdictions and have also reached out to key stakeholders in Bermuda for their views on the proposed Children's Commission, which I am currently considering. Mr. Speaker, I plan to bring legislation forward this year to give effect to the Children's Commission. Mr. Speaker, in tandem with this work, we are collaborating with the Foreign and Commonwealth Office and have engaged consultants to conduct a review of litigation guardians and counsel services provided for under the Children's Act of 1998, as well as training. Mr. Speaker, to assist us in reviewing the litigation guardian service and any improvements that can be made to highly experienced court professionals will be working with us over the next 9 months. They will be supporting Bermuda to determine the model that works for us, taking into account the experiences of other jurisdictions. Their role is supportive and advisory. Mr. Speaker, they are currently meeting with key stakeholders in Bermuda about how litigation guardian services can be improved. Litigation guardian service. The training will be open to all professionals, including litigation guardians themselves, of course, litigation counsel, members of the judiciary, and social workers. This is not an exclusive list, and there are some key individuals who will also benefit from being involved in this program. Mr. Speaker, the 2020 Thurn speech also stated that this government would fulfill the void that exists when young people age out of government care. The government will establish independent living coordinators who will devise individual plans for our young people coming out of care to provide affordable housing options, post-secondary education, and career advice, as well as access to physical and mental health care. Mr. Speaker, at age 18, children in care of the director, most of whom have spent the majority of their childhood with the Department of Child and Family Services, are now expected to shift from being dependent on support from the department to young adults dependent on themselves virtually overnight. Some have had little to no support from their family. It is important the Department of Child and Family Services continue to provide support services needed, if agreed to prevent adverse outcomes such as early parenthood, involvement with the criminal justice system, poverty, homelessness, and the dependence on financial assistance. Mr. Speaker, in order to reduce the barrier for successful transition to adulthood and invest in the success of these young people, the Department of Child and Family Services has developed an independent living program. This program is designed specifically for children aging out of care who at 18 do not have an identified transition plan. Considerations will be given to those children who are involved with DCFS and have aged out within the previous 18 months based on established criteria. Mr. Speaker, the Independent Living Program will provide stable housing and intensive support and guidance to assist these young persons developing the life skills necessary to become successful and productive citizens. Program deliverables will ensure the young person has stable housing, support in education and vocational training, attains money management skills, support the young person in building and maintaining healthy relationships and lifelong connections with caring adults. Establish connections to medical and social emotional resources and assist the young person in securing and maintaining employment. Mr. Speaker, collaboration will take place with workforce development to have the independent living program participants engage with career development officers as a mandatory requirement for employment readiness via their personal employment plan. This will also be required for financial assistance eligibility under the new financial assistance form. Mr. Speaker, the Department of Child and Family Services is working with the Ministry of Public Works to identify a physical location for the male participants of the Independent Living Program. $500,000 has been allocated in this financial year for the property. The Haven is the identified residential location for female program participants under a memorandum of understanding. The upper level of its Bayview property will be dedicated for use by the Independent Living Program. Mr. Speaker, the Independent Living Program will be operational 24 hours. There will be professional staff, independent living coordinators, and support staff engaged to implement the program. Staff will come forward trained in working with young persons with complex needs and will be equipped to deliver programming in accordance with best practice standards on youth independent living services. Having staff who fully understand trauma-informed, strength-based service delivery and the performance quality improvement process will ensure a seamless and successful implementation of the quality program. Mr. Speaker, the original timeline for this program was scheduled for April 1st, 2021, with an official launch operational date of 2021. However, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and its restrictions, the timeline for the launch has been pushed back, and the revised launch date is for September 2021. Mr. Speaker, the ministry is also developing a national senior strategy to meet the needs of the growing senior population in Bermuda, to enable Bermudians to age well with dignity and respect. I look forward to bringing this strategy to this honorable house in due course. Mr. Speaker, one of the most vulnerable groups in our community are the homeless, or those that are unsheltered. These individuals or families who lack stable, appropriate housing. The economic effects of COVID has added to the numbers of the unsheltered who were particularly challenged during the recent shelter-in-place phases. Mr. Speaker, this government is cognizant of the challenges of the unsheltered and is helping. This includes the initiatives being managed by my colleague, the Honorable David Birch, Minister of Public Works, under the short-term economic stimulus package, some $1,600,000 in the Bermuda Housing Corporation projects that will produce 17 residential units. This is adding much-needed units to the housing stock of the BHC, who provide a significant service to those needing affordable housing. Mr. Speaker, the ministry is this year providing some $550,000 in direct grant funds to support the operations at the emergency shelter on North Street for the unsheltered. My honorable colleague is replacing the emergency housing shelter on North Street with a new facility this year, which will provide a modern and more suitable facility to those most in need. Mr. Speaker, this ministry provides a further $2,050,000 in grants to assist with housing for seniors and other vulnerable groups. This, combined with the work and funds provided by other entities within government, include financial assistance, ensure that those most in need are helped and will continue to be helped. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to fine-tune our response to assisting the unsheltered and collaborate with the third sector to ensure that resources are directed to those who are most in need. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank those organizations in the third sector who have worked so hard to provide assistance to the most vulnerable in our community during this very challenging time. I have had regular meetings with them as we moved through each phase of the reopening of Bermuda to get updates on the challenges that their clients and their organizations were facing. Their selfless work to help Bermudians in need is heartwarming, and I encourage my fellow Bermudians, if you cannot give financial support to these entities, please give up your time. Mr. Speaker, I will continue to collaborate with the third sector groups to ensure that this government is fully aware of the challenges faced by the third sector and their clients. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister Ferbert. That is the end of the ministerial statements. There are no reports of committee. This is the question period, and the question period lasts for 60 minutes. The first one is an oral question to the Honorable Minister Renee Mee. Minister, you have the floor.
Sure. Mr. Speaker, the question was, will the Honorable Minister please inform this Honorable House the total monthly cost to the government for all the quarantine sites from inception of the program to July 10th, 2021? Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to provide that amount. And the weekend is July 11th, so these values actually are at July 11th, and it's based on invoices received, and it would be $119,034.72.
Thank you. Mr. Simons, do you have any further questions?
No, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister.
You're quite welcome.
So far we have questions. Two persons would like to ask questions. The Honorable Member Neville Tyrrell would like to ask a question of the Minister Scott.
Mr. Speaker, I sent you questions too.
Oh, my apologies.
Sent you a number of them.
Okay, I don't see them, but that's no problem. You can. For what? You can continue, Mr. Simons. Hello, Mr. Joe.
Okay, I have a question for the Minister of Works on Charles Bay Plant.
Okay, that's the first statement.
That's correct.
Okay.
And the statement says most of the power is sold onto Belco Power Grid. Can the minister confirm the total revenue realized from Belco from the sale of the energy for the past 2 fiscal years? Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, that is a question that was not listed within. That was a question that's actually something that was not listed in the states that will actually require some research. I do believe, following the rules of the House, questions should be pertaining to everything that is in the statement. Not requiring me to actually go and actually dig up that information like that. But I can endeavor to get that information to that member from the Ministry of Works.
Yeah, just can't.
Any further questions, Mr. Simons?
Just a second question. It says the plan will see time being repurposed as renewable
What page are you reading from?
Page 2.
2.
Yes. It says the plan will see time being repurposed as a renewable energy hub for waste and water facilities. Will this have an impact on the amount of energy sold to Belco? That's a supplement.
Minister?
Again, Mr. Speaker, I'm just waiting for technical staff. I see the response. Here's the question. It's I guess it's the response to the question that was first asked. Typical sale is 180K per month. Whether the repurposing of the plant will have an effect on that, it's going to be something that I'll have to get back to the member on. I do apologize, Mr. Speaker, and I apologize to the member. I was asked to read this only because the substantive minister is having technical difficulties while he's traveling to be online. And then the second question that I have on page 4, if not for times paid, the same garbage will find itself either destroying what's left of Pembroke Marsh. Can the minister make an undertaking that he would share with his house plans that they have for Pembroke Marsh going forward? I can definitely take that undertaking on and make sure the technical officers have that question, and we can provide some clarity around that. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any further questions on the Tynes Bay critical status report?
I do, Mr. Speaker. MP Richardson.
Mr. Richardson, continue.
Thank you. Thank the Honorable Minister. In his statement, or in the substantive minister's statement, it was said that some components were either deficient or not functioning, and then later on, it said in the statement that we're going into a full refurbishment of the Tynes Bay facility. My question to the minister would be, how long will the refurbishment take?
Thank you for that question, Honorable Member. I do want to say I think the statement mentioned around 5 years, but I am waiting for technical officers to get me that particular answer.
Any further questions, MP Richardson?
Yes, sir. Supplemental on that one. would the Honorable Minister be able to speak to the specific work that's going to take place at the site? And obviously mindful that that may have to be looked up.
Yes, thank you for that question. Again, I can undertake to get the statement didn't go into exactly what works will be undertaken. I do know from actually being a cabinet minister and this thing that there has to be a full refurbishment. When you say full refurbishment and rebuild, that is exactly what it sounds like, a virtual complete rebuild. If we are talking about the entire plant, I was correct in saying that the estimate is around 5 years for a complete rebuild of the entire plant.
Any further questions on this statement?
Second question, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
What will happen? The minister said there is some 200 to 300 tons of trash processed at the facility. What's the plans going forward for all of that waste?
And thank you, member. The plans for that is to continue to have the plant operate as it has been operating, with fingers crossed that we do not have any catastrophic things that force the plant to not be able to operate. But as it's standing now, it is operating with the fixes that have been put in place. But we do recognize that that is not a sustainable model, and so we will continue to utilize it as it is while the moving forward with the new plant.
And supplemental, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, continue.
What correspondence or communication will go out to the public in relation to services at Tynes Bay, alterations to services at Tynes Bay, if a person wants to take trash or use any of those facilities? Where can they look up what they can and cannot do, or are we anticipating a full service going forward?
All government announcements are issued by, we now have WhatsApp, we have Freefrog, we have the website, we have direct mailings. I'm sure you've received direct mailings about what's going on at times, trash collection and recycle. So there are numerous ways in which the public will be kept abreast, also including social media and traditional media. There will be numerous ways that the public will be kept abreast of everything that is going on, so they can get well in advance where we are and what restrictions there might be coming if those restrictions have to be put in place.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Honorable Minister. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Any further members have questions for the minister on that statement? Okay. The next questions we have is for the Minister of Education on primary schools.
I have a question.
Continue.
On page 2, the minister indicates that we use well thought out and defined criteria that identify the best existing schools like Parish. My question is, for the application of the community, and the minister succinctly define what criteria used in identifying those schools that will be used going forward?
And thank you for that question. As I talked about in the statement, the criteria is in the public domain. It was part of the consultation document. So I could say that the question you've asked, sir, has been in the public domain since December 2020. There are clearly defined 19 attributes. I actually don't have all 19 of them in front of me, but there are clearly defined 19 attributes that were taken into account when we looked at each site. Each site was judged by the same criteria, and then parishes that had multiple schools were then compared. The sites within those parishes were compared against each other, and the sites that had the highest score were the ones chosen. But again, the consultation document can be located on the Ministry of Education's website, moed.pm. It's approximately about 80 pages long, and I want to say about 20, just over 20 pages of that is talk about what the criteria is, and it lists the actual scores that each site got. So there is no, it's extremely transparent. All data and documentation is there for you to see, and as we would say, it's already in the public domain. It's and if you wish, that member, I can have it, I could send to him directly, or he could go to the website and download it and look at it himself.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions on that statement?
Yes,
Yes,
I do.
Deputy Speaker, I have a supplementary to that question.
Yes, Ms. Jackson, MP.
Good morning, Minister. My
Good morning.
question is, given the criteria in the public domain, I would also like to ask, what is the minister's criteria or response to graduates and parents of high-performing schools that are now being closed?
Again, that was a question that came up during the consultation process. Like I said, the consultation process went from December to now. Again, the answer to that question is within the various documents that were displayed, because it's one thing that we knew was going to be asked, and so we ensured that we talked about it. High performance schools, and we will say that high performance schools is not an indication of whether the site itself is suitable for redevelopment. High performance schools is what we would consider an intangible thing that is very difficult to measure, because it does not take into account facilities, it doesn't take into account services that are required for the individual children, it doesn't take into account equitable services being supplied throughout the system. So there are lots of different intangibles that go into when you start talking about high performance schools. And so what we are assured of is that when we provide the necessary services and all of our schools are able to stand up and say they have all of the tools that are required for all of those students to succeed, no matter where those children come from, how much money their parents have or don't have, or what difficulties or specialties that they bring to the table, still be able to ensure that they have everything that they need. And so we feel, and the documentation and the data that we collected certainly does support that moving to Parish primary schools will provide all of our children to succeed and do away with the system of having some schools that seemingly succeed and others that don't.
Any further questions?
I have another question. On page 3
Mhm.
of the statement, the minister indicated that he will be engaging a project and program management firm to deliver and manage the transition. My question is, how much has the government budgeted for this management firm's engagement over the number of years for the transition?
That is a good question. I don't have the exact figures, but that is something that was budgeted in this year's budget for that engagement. So it's a question I can endeavor to get back to the member with on the exact number that was budgeted for this fiscal year for that, but it is something that has been budgeted for.
And will supplement, and will this engagement be put out to the calendar or will it be extended?
This engagement, as a matter of fact, honorable member, we are in the process of discussing. We've been discussing for the last month and a half with the Ministry of Works, which of course covers lands and buildings, which owns all of the school buildings, and OPMP. We've been in discussions on how the RFP for that process will work. So in the target date is September. We will be releasing an RFP for bids for that work.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions on that?
Mr. Speaker, I still have a question for the minister.
Yes, Ms. Jackson, continue.
Thank you. Minister, just getting back to the criteria again, there was much said about the physical plan, but again, I'm curious if the minister might shed some light on what is being done to assess and adopt and save the quality teaching that has occurred within high-performing schools that are now closing. What's being done to save that information, to protect those elements within the school system that are working really well from a performance perspective, so that those high performance behaviors are transferred into this performed physical plan that you mentioned.
And thank you, member, for that question. First, I want to correct a misnomer when you say physical plan. We looked at the physical site to see if the site could be redeveloped. That doesn't. I know. It's a popular thing that the RG keeps mentioning, that we looked at physical buildings to see what buildings can be redeveloped. It is not. We looked at the actual site to see how if the site can support the redevelopment of the schools of the future. And so I just want to take that time to clarify that. In terms of what is working and what is not working within our system, as you would well know, I have done a briefing with you, education reform not just involves the creation of physical buildings that will fit 21st century learning. It also has to undertake the Learning First program, a program that has been put in place to examine how teaching is done, how learning is done, and what the system needs and what we need to do in terms of retooling, retraining, and helping our teachers become better teachers at what it is they do, as well as revamping our curriculum so that it has become more relevant for the students that we do have. The second part of that, as you would know as well, is the phasing out of the middle school system and reverting back to a two-tier system. The work of that was done early this year when we passed the Education Amendment Act, which paved the way for that. And as it's been put in the public domain, we will have the first of our two signature schools opening in 2022 school year, and that is at Sea Bridge Academy and the Barkley Institute. The third part, which the member is aware of, is the creation of the Education Authority. The purpose of the Education Authority is to look at how schools operate, the governance around how schools operate, and produce more accountability within our education system. The Education Authority team has been busy interviewing and conducting question and answer sessions with all of our schools and our teachers and our principals, as well as our aided schools, because the school that you're referring to is an aided school, to discuss how they operate, what is it they do, so we can incorporate the pluses, we can incorporate the things that are being done well, we can look at the things that are not being done well and how we can improve them, and produce a system that has the governance structure in place that produces the children, that produces the students that need for Bermuda to succeed. And so all of that in mind and combined, all three of those strands will, in fact, take a system that is disjointed, a system that is inequitable, and a system that does not provide our children with the necessary tools to succeed at all times, into a system that does exactly what we want to do, and that is give every single child in Bermuda access to a world-quality education and the opportunity to be successful.
Supplementary, Deputy Speaker.
Continue.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and thank you, Minister. We're talking about school sites, Minister. I was just curious as to, we're talking about plans for the teachers and students and the like. What about the actual school sites themselves that will be done? Are there any plans that have been put in place for these particular buildings, knowing that maintenance is difficult to keep up for public works? Has there been any talk about what to do with these sites?
Could you clarify your question?
So for the
member,
sure.
Are you referring to sites that will be eventually discontinued, or sites that?
That's correct. That is correct. That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And that is a topical question. In terms of sites that will be discontinued, as I mentioned in the statement, discontinuing will not start to be phased in for several years from now. And at that point, it will not be all schools will cease to exist and will move to another. There will be an eventual movement. So it's something that will have to be planned, and this is why we talk about the project and program management. This is something that will have to be planned and phased in over several years. However, while during the consultation process, there have been suggestions on what could happen with school sites that will eventually be discontinued such things as like youth centers, daycare centers. Some people even suggested government offices. There's when we talk about our historical legacy preservation committee, there's an idea of turning one of them into a museum of some sort or for education. So there are a multitude of ideas, and there are also people that have come out of the woodwork. You say, hey, I have a plan. If you're not going to use the school, can I utilize the school for something? So that is still all in its very formative stages now. But I can rest assured that the public will be kept engaged. Of course, the Ministry of Works will have to be engaged because the schools, school buildings fall under them as well. But there will be robust plans as we move along to discuss what could be happening with the buildings that are no longer used. I think also critically especially in some areas, public engagement will have to be a very critical part of that engagement as well, to determine what happens to these schools. Some of them that have been community school buildings for generations within their community. So, to answer your question succinctly, there has been a lot of ideas that have been put out. We're not quite at that space yet, but the ideas are being collated and will definitely come into play, and the public will know about them to figure out what is right.
Deputy Speaker?
Yeah.
Yeah, 2023 will be here relatively quick. It's not too far off, quite frankly, as we head to the other half of 2021. I was hoping that maybe, and I'm looking at your thinking on these lines as well, that this might be a revenue opportunity also for government, knowing that potentially sell some themselves from these buildings. Renting always is a difficult thing, but I do believe and hope that you might be looking at that. Would you consider that as well? Sale of
At this point, there is no idea that is off the table. As I said, there are people that have come out of the woodwork that have come and said, "Hey, I'm looking for a property. I'm looking to run, something there. This would be a perfect opportunity for me." So there have been people that have come and expressed various ideas, but at this point, it's difficult to put the cart before the horse here. When it comes to education, we've always tended to make bold statements about the data, about the patients, to back it up. This time, we're trying to do things completely different and walk before we run when it comes to education reform. As you heard me saying the statement, first and foremost on our minds is what is best for the children. Once that is settled and that is answered and we'll move forward with that, then we'll take on the rest of it. Although I do recognize that it does have to be, some of this stuff doesn't have to be done simultaneously. But rest assured, there is nothing that is off the table when it comes to what needs to be done in order to ensure that our children get the best that we have to offer.
Supplementary, Mr. Adams.
Continue.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, you said that there's nothing that's off the table. But presumably, after all of this time and consultation, your decision to close 9 schools, you must have some plan on the table for what you will do with the closed school sites.
I believe I just answered that question.
If I just asked you if you have a plan that's on the table, you just said nothing's off the table. Is there a plan on the table?
I said I believe I answered that question, but the question prior to yours was, do we have any ideas what's going to happen with the schools? And I extensively answered the question that there have been lots of suggestions, there have been things, and I even mentioned some of the suggestions that have come from the consultation process. But I also reiterated that we are in the process of making the decision to move forward. Now that we know what the decision is, we can start now looking at how that decision can be affected. As we said, after the 2022-23 school year, we can start, and we can then start talking about these suggestions that have come. You're asking me, is there anything on the table? And so, since you've asked, I'll reiterate what I said earlier. We've had suggestions of using.
Minister, there's no need to repeat.
Okay, thank you, Minister.
You answered the question. Any further questions? No further questions? The next questions I have is for the Minister of Transport and it's from the honorable member Scott Pearman to Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker, and thank you, Minister of Transport. Thank you for your statement to the House this morning on the minimum revenue payment T numbers for Porter and Skyport. Minister, it's probably not a surprise, these numbers, but I'd ask you to indicate to the House where the situation stands now with the diminished airlift to Canada and the stunted airlift to the United States, and how and when you see those changing. Thank you.
As of right now, the airlift to Canada will be returning, as Air Canada has indicated that they are going to be putting on their flight back to Canada shortly. Also, the airlift to the United States has diminished, but that is also slated to return. But right now, it seems as though international commercial travel is operating at about 30 to 40% of pre-pandemic numbers, and is not anticipated, and meaning projected by IATA, who is the International Air Transport Association, to return to pre-COVID numbers until 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Supplementary.
Continue.
Thank you, Minister. In terms of the Canadian airlift, you indicated it's likely to return. Can you give us some sort of rough estimate on time frame?
As of right now, with the communications that we've had, is that it should be reinstated prior to school going back in September.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Supplementary.
Continue.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Thank you, Minister. In terms of the stunted aircraft lift to the United States, again, are you able to give us some sort of indication on the time frame as to when we will see that returning to capacity? Airlift capacity as opposed to numbers on the plane?
We are unable to do that at this time. Once again, the best that we have is the IATA projections, which would say that international commercial air travel will return to pre-COVID numbers in 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Second question.
Yes.
Thank you. Honorable Minister, IATA has indicated that we will be returning to pre-COVID numbers in 2024, as you stated. Others have indicated we might be closer to normalcy levels, or at least Bermuda normalcy levels in 2022. Do you agree with that or disagree with that? Is that too ambitious? Is that too negative? Can we sense that and you can share with the House?
The only way that I would be more inclined to lean and rely on the IATA numbers, as IATA is one of the more trusted agencies and internationally recognized agencies. When it comes to Bermuda's numbers, there are plans in place, and the one way that we would be able to get back to pre-COVID numbers prior to that would be based off of the Bermuda government or the ministry being able to successfully execute our air service development policy. That policy is what you've already seen go in place now, which is based off of the locally inspired routes. For example, the nonstop to Azores route, which has been successful and has been extended from past its original date. But also we're looking at basing it on the makeup of the community as a whole. So the ministry is now focusing in on the Caribbean, and we believe that with us focusing in on the Caribbean, that will help us get flights back on track sooner. But I do want to state that we are looking at other destinations outside of the Caribbean that will help us get back on track. But that is why it is very important for our air service development to get back up and running, to try to get us back on track prior to or sooner than 2024.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Acting Speaker, supplementary.
Yes.
Thank you, Minister. Just in terms of the return to normalcy and the UK routes, I understand that there are some positive signs in recent days and weeks in relation to pay rate. Are you able to give the House any update on that position?
Yes, British Airways has indicated that they are going to increase their frequency, which is good, but keep in mind that although they are increasing their frequency, does not mean that they are matching the pre-COVID frequency that they had before. And so that's what we have to maintain. Where yes, you do see that we have full flights coming in from the United States, but the United States air carriers are using smaller aircraft, which carry less passengers. So we still do not have the same frequency, nor do we have the same seat availability as we did pre-COVID.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Acting Speaker, second and final supplementary.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Thank you for that clarity of that answer. Again, still on trying to get the return to normalcy here, which you share the same information in respect of Miami and New York, and in particular the American Airlines situation. Thank you.
Were you asking about Miami, the Miami route?
Yes, Miami and New York,
Okay.
and in particular the American Airlines situation.
So right now, American Airlines is doing very well out of Charlotte. They are slowly reintroducing the Miami run. You'll see that they are on Saturdays, which means they're once a week out of Miami. When it comes to going out of New York, but it goes back to what I mentioned before. The U.S. international travel market is not where it used to be, and the airlines do not believe that they can support multiple persons out of JFK, multiple air carriers out of JFK as they did pre-pandemic. And so once again, that's where Bermuda has to start to take the bull by the horns and create a nimble air service development strategy that is strategic, long-term, consistent, and reliable, but also nimble when it needs to be.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker.
Member Tyrrell, Honorable Member Tyrrell, you have questions for the Transport Minister?
Yes, Mr. Acting Speaker, thank you very much. Good morning, colleagues. Mr. Acting Speaker, my question centers around the minimum revenue guarantee, and I'd like to ask the Minister, for the benefit of the listening public, what is his ministry doing to reduce or stop these MRD payments?
I thank the member for the question. The main thing that we are doing to stop the MRG payments is, as I mentioned earlier, was our air service development strategy. But I think it would be helpful for the House to know that the MRG is based off of departures, not necessarily arrivals. And so that is why the ministry is looking to go to locally based and locally inspired routes, i.e. Azores, Caribbean, and we are also looking at West Africa, which is part of the African Diaspora Trail, and points in Western Canada right now, which will provide connectivity onward to the Philippines and India. And so when we put that in place, given that those routes are locally driven, you'll have persons that will be departing the island, but also those persons will be inviting what we call VFR, visiting friends and relatives, who will come in to visit their friends and relatives here in Bermuda, because we have made it more convenient for them to get to Bermuda, and so therefore when they stay, they visit, and then they leave as well. But also going to these routes will allow for us to be able to allow every possible demographic, those that currently are unable to travel to the United States, Canada, or the UK due to extenuating circumstances, they'll be able to travel to the Caribbean and or West Africa, which increases our departure numbers and helps mitigate our risk against paying the MRG.
Any further questions, Mr. Tyrrell?
Second question, Mr. Acting Speaker. Noted in the statement that we're expecting additional MRD payments in 2021. Minister, how many more payments after 2021 are there likely to be?
I wish I could say that we would have no payments at the end of 2021, but I think it is safe to say that we will be paying MRGs until 2024 which is when IATA, as stated earlier, indicates that the international commercial air service will be returning to pre-pandemic numbers. But we also feel as though there is a possibility, based off of how successful our air service development strategy is, that we should be able to, may be able to stop having payments prior to that.
Any further questions, Mr. Terrell?
Supplementary, Mr. Acting Speaker.
Yes.
Minister, is there anything else we can do to avoid these MRG payments?
Contrary to popular belief, even if we were to cancel the agreement today, we would still have MRG payments to make, but just to different entities. But what we can do is, and what is being done, I should say, is that the airport authority is looking into researching and doing their due diligence on every possible additional revenue stream. Right now, to give an example so that it doesn't seem too far-fetched, is that the airport authority is looking at expanding Bermuda's airspace, which means that that would provide us with additional air navigation services, revenues, and other things like that. So every time a aircraft flies through that expanded airspace, we would be paid by the airlines for that. And we are estimating that at this present time, for the first 2 weeks of July, we've had close to 800 flights fly through our airspace versus the roughly 40 flights that have actually landed at our airport.
Any further questions or supplementary, Mr. Terrell?
No, thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's it. Thank you.
I think the next person wanted to ask questions was Mr. Richardson, Alderman Richardson.
No, Mr. Speaker, thank you, but I wasn't.
Okay, the next questions was to the Minister of Social Development and Seniors, Ms. Furbert. And I think,
I have one.
to who, Ms. Furbert?
Yes.
Continue.
Thank you. The minister on page 1 opens her statement by saying, I will provide updates on the extension of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in Bermuda. My question is, given that in the corporate community, there is a lot of emphasis on diversity and ESG governance protocols, and as you know that the ESG governance protocols address social issues which covers employee and diversity. So my question to the minister is this: has the minister embarked upon a campaign that will provide employment opportunities and employment support for the visually impaired, hearing impaired, and people on autistic spectrum, because they are deemed to be full category as persons?
Mr. Speaker, I apologize. My connection isn't too great today, and I did miss some of the contents of that question.
Mr. Simons, you want to repeat that, please?
As you know, in the corporate community, a lot. You hear me, Minister?
Yes.
Okay, as you know, in the corporate community, a lot of emphasis has been placed on ESG, which is the environmental and social governance protocols globally from an investment point of view. And part of that ESG protocols, they examine social issues, and other social issues are employee and diversity. So my question to you is, has the government embarked upon a campaign that will provide employment opportunities and employment support for the visually impaired, hearing impaired, and people on the autism spectrum? Because there are other disabilities, but these people can be functional. and should be able to find employment opportunities in our community.
Mr. Speaker, the question is one that I don't think will come out of my ministerial statement. However, at this present time, there is no campaign that has been started in regards to employability for persons with disabilities. However, the transposition table which we have created does seek out a section in regards to employment opportunities for persons with disabilities. So that is actually included in the transposition table. So which means, and I apologize, I don't have the transposition table in front of me to be able to say exactly what it states, but the UN Convention will assess where we are and will make recommendations to us to where we need to get to.
So are we saying, based on the UN, supplement?
Continue.
So are we saying that given the review by the UN for our, where we stand as a jurisdiction on the disability and compliance with the convention, that we will do something to address the caring and autistic spectrum population and employment, and we'll have a plan for them sometime in the future.
I don't want to, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to just speak to the population of autism. We're talking about a whole population of persons with disabilities.
And I just
yes.
said visually impaired. I just gave them an example. Visually impaired, hearing impaired, autism. Well, I go across the whole range of disadvantage.
And currently, if anyone who is experiencing discrimination across any sort of employment sector should be supported by the Human Rights Commission, because they do address issues of discrimination. The other area which does help persons with disabilities is the KMCC, Margaret Carter Center, the K. Margaret Carter Center, who also provides a working program. That does not mean there is not much more. There is more work to be done as far as employment opportunities for persons with disabilities. I'm just trying to seek through the transposition table, but I mean I can share this transposition table. That's not an issue. I can do that, where you can take a look.
Mr. Simons, any further questions?
No further questions.
Okay, the next, Mr. Pearman, you have a question for the minister?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Minister, thank you for your statement to the House this morning. In respect to the UN Convention of Rights with Persons with Disability, you said the technical officers at the top of page 2 of your statement. Technical officers have conducted a thorough review of the necessary articles of the convention to determine Bermuda's current compliance and what is required. And you say the good news is that Bermuda is compliant in many areas, but there is still much work to be done. Does that mean that we are not compliant in certain areas?
Yes, honourable member. So with the transposition table, it looks at what areas we are non-compliant in, partially compliant, and fully compliant. So there are areas where we are not compliant.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Supplementary.
Supplementary, continue.
Minister, you referred to a table which sets out compliance and not compliance and self-compliance. Will you table that document in the House?
I will be definitely giving an update in regards to where we are with the UN conventions. Today I spoke of, well, I can actually give you some information. The transposition table is currently with AG Chambers for review, and then it will be extended to government house, in which we will await back feedback from government house in regards to the convention. But once we have more details in regards to that, I have no problem with sharing the transposition table. So we're definitely not compliant in some areas, but not just government, it's island-wide as well.
I understand. Supplementary, Mr. Acting Speaker.
Continue.
Thank you. Pending you tabling that document, could you just at a very high level identify the areas of particular concern that you have?
I'm sorry, repeat that, honorable member.
Thank you, Minister. Until we actually see that document, are you able to identify any high-level areas of concern that you have?
Yes, actually, one of those areas is the employment of persons with disabilities in the private sector. Another area is social protection programs to reduce poverty, particularly with women, girls with disabilities. But in due course, I can definitely advise on where we are compliant and non-compliant or partially compliant.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. Second question.
Yes, continue, Mr.
Thank you. Minister, changing topics slightly to the issue of litigation guardians, which is also dealt with in your statement at pages 2 and 3. You've indicated in your statement to the House that you, with collaborating with foreign and Commonwealth offices, engaged consultants to conduct a review of litigation guardians. You then refer in the paragraph thereafter to 2 highly experienced court professionals who will be working with us over the next 9 months. It's not clear if the consultants are the 2 highly experienced people you refer to, but my question is this: who has been engaged, and roughly at what cost?
Actually, honorable member, I'd like to change the question because we're not ordering the Foreign Commonwealth Office. The Foreign Commonwealth Office is collaborating with the ministry in regards to litigation guardians and counsel. And the Foreign Commonwealth Office is actually responsible for the costs associated with the 2 consultants.
Thank you. I did quote you as saying collaborating with, not ordering. But thank you. Supplementary, Mr. Acting Speaker.
Continue.
Thank you. Well, it's actually the same question. Are you able to identify who's been engaged?
Yes, give me 1 second, honorable member. I have their names in my head, but I definitely don't want to mess them up.
Thank you. While you're getting that answer, I'm happy to ask my second supplementary, Mr. Acting Speaker.
Yes.
Thank you. Minister, also still on the same issue, at the top of page 3 of your statement, you refer to the 6-month training program for litigation guardians, and you say it will be open to all. I'm just curious whether or not the litigation guardians themselves will be required to attend this training, or whether that's a discretionary option open to them. So if you could answer that and the issue of who the consultants will be, I'd be grateful.
Sure. Yes, all the current litigation guardians will be expected to participate in the training. And we will also open it up to other persons who are interested in litigation guardian training as well. For the 2 consultants, it is Anthony Douglas, the ex-director of CAFCAS, and Cyrus Laraday, a QC from London.
Thank you, Minister. I'm actually familiar with all of them, and thank you for your answer. Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are there any other questions? Because we don't have any, but if it is not. Okay, that's the end of question period. Now we go to congrats and obituary speeches. Are there any congratulatory bits?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Yes. Mr. Weeks? Continue.
trying to get my video up and running, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, sir.
Okay, can I start while my video is popping?
Certainly. Go right ahead.
All right. Mr. Speaker, good morning to you. Mr. Acting Speaker, good morning to you. Good morning to my colleagues and to the Mr. Public. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to ask that this House takes part with me in congratulations and recognize my constituent, Mr. Nicole Famous, to celebrate over a decade of natural blessings always movement on the same day that she celebrates her birthday, which is today, Mr. Speaker. So happy birthday to Nicole. The movement was conceived in 2009 to celebrate the beauty of natural black hair. Ms. Famous wanted to highlight the beauty and diversity of black hair while celebrating self-love amongst all black women. The program was first launched as a small hair show for the community at the St. Paul's AME Church Centennial Hall. The annual expo grew to incorporate charitable and community giving initiatives. Mr. Acting Speaker, and each year the committee would identify community members who could benefit from the proceeds of the attended event. I was there on a few occasions. They have donated, Mr. Acting Speaker, Belco vouchers, Rochi vouchers, and other vouchers from various vendors across the island to our seniors in need. This expo has featured tutorials and demonstrations by local hair care professionals, farmers, as well as international leaders in the world of natural hair care. Mr. Deputy Speaker, 2020 would have marked the 10th Natural Blessings Always Hair Expo. Of course, COVID pushed this momentous occasion back, but the Quill Famous has announced that 2021 Natural Blessings Always Hair Expo will be produced as a broadcast event and will air on Channel 82, the community station, on November 20th, 2021. Over the years, this organization has also provided scholarships to students and donations to those who need. Today, Mr. Acting Speaker, Ms. Famous has announced the presentation of a book bursary for Sheila Ray, a Bermuda College student in 2021. I am proud of the work that my constituent, Ms. Nicole Famous, has put into elevating her community, and I salute her and his contributions to Bermuda. Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Riggs. Any further speakers?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
We recognize the honorable member, Ms. Levita Fugo.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to congratulatory.
Yeah.
Firstly, I would like the House to join me in saying a belated happy birthday to one of our former members, Mr. Arthur Pitcher, who celebrated 7 decades very recently. And there are some who today who would remember him when he was in the House. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, another former member of the House, but part of the legislative staff, I would like us to congratulate Mr. Dominic Jones, who not only a few years back received his undergraduate degree, Bachelor of Arts degree in management, but just recently graduated with his master's degree, Master of Science degree in international business. I highlight that because Dominic Jones, and many of us remember him because he worked in the House of Assembly, is one of Bermuda's success stories. In spite of not having any assistance, I guess, growing up, because he was an orphan child for quite some time, and an adult orphan, he decided that he wanted to serve Bermuda in a different capacity. And he went back to school, starting at Bermuda College. He did extremely well. And then from there, because of his grades, was able to secure a scholarship from the school he attended for Dalhousie University, a partial scholarship from there. And he is one of those Bermudians who had no finances, I guess, to rely on. And what was developing gave him a mature student award. I think it was for $15,000. So he was the successful applicant of that award, I believe, under us. And then from there, when he pursued his master's degree, again, what he was developing, wanting to ensure, because the landscape has changed for those persons who need assistance, wanting to ensure that this young man did realize success. They introduced giving awards to one or two graduate students, and he was the recipient, I believe, of a $5,000 award, which allowed him, though he had to work very hard, and it allowed him to realize his Master of Science degree. And so he is a shining example of what government has done over the years to help its people realize their dreams and that they can come back and be successful members of our society and give back to the community. So I want
your 3 minutes is up.
Thank you.
Any other speakers?
Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Yes, DP list of 3. Remember?
Good morning, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Good morning to Mr. Audience, my fellow colleagues. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I would like to send some congratulatory remarks to this house to none other who is absent today. You see, you're taking the speaker, Mr. Speaker, and you listen. He and my mother, they actually celebrate 40 years of marriage today. So I'd like to send congratulations to them.
I guess we associate the whole house with that.
I will too. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, in saying that, I would be remiss of myself, and I probably would not get dinner this evening.
Wow.
On Tuesday, July 20th, my wife and I, we celebrated our first year of marriage. So I'd like to, again, for the house to send congratulations to my wife and I. And Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to add that, and Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'd like to add to the Speaker of the House, those 40 years. I can only wish them many more years of marriage, and only wish that my wife and I can enjoy our marriage as long as they have. So thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Yes, and thank you, DP list of 3. Any further speakers?
Mr. Speaker,
Yes, Ms. Herbert.
thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I would like to also send condolences to the family of the Outer Bridges through Harlem Heights. We had a loss of we've had a loss of Miss Yvonne Otterbridge, who is the mother of Ashton and Jean-Ann, and to the whole Harlem Heights family. We just want the house to send condolences to that family. And also, Mr. Speaker, just wanted to highlight some Special Olympians. Send some congratulatories to some Special Olympians that we have. And that is Bridget Marshall, who plays tennis, Eden Woolery, who plays equestrian, Michael Lambert, who's a tennis player, Danielle Gibbons, she's the athlete leader, and Wayne Smith, who is a bowler. All of these athletes will be representing, recently qualified to represent Bermuda in the 2022 USA Summer Games in Orlando, Florida. So wanted to send a special congratulations out to our Special Olympian team members.
Let me associate myself with the remarks concerning Ms. Yvonne Otterbridge of Harlem Heights. Ms. Otterbridge was a lifelong member at St. John's AME Church, and she'll be sorely missed by the church family. Any further speakers?
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Swan, Honorable Member Swan, you have the floor.
Thank you for that. I'm glad I was able to get in. Mr. Speaker, I would like to have a letter of thank you and congratulations, if possible, sent to Nicholas and Alexandra Polvino. I had the honor of meeting them at Fort Royal Golf Course this week. They are celebrating their marriage in Bermuda. having it been delayed because of COVID. But they had planned to be here and they made it to Bermuda. They enjoy golf, so he was able to play one round, and I invited him to come back and play golf with me because he was doing the right thing, Mr. Acting Speaker, and spending the rest of the vacation honeymoon with his wife. But they are an example of a young couple starting off their life as husband and wife in Bermuda. And I thank them and I wish them well, and I wish them many years of happiness, and may Bermuda be a part of not only their remembrance of their marriage, but their future family could enjoy our lovely island, as many have in the past, doing it exactly that way. So I wanted to mention their marriage during these difficult times that we've all encountered, and wish them well from this pub to the Polvinos from New York, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. Their families are very much a part of our family now. Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker.
Honorable Member, I trust you will provide the information of address and proper name to spelling to the clerk. Any further?
Thank you.
Yes. Any further speakers? There appear to be none at this point. No further speakers on congrats or bids? Okay.
Speaker?
Yes, Mr. Famous?
Yeah, sorry, my bandwidth was a little crappier. My video would keep cutting out. I just want to give condolences to the Earl of Devonshire because we lost one of our own, Mr. Kirby Grant, commonly known as Gaffer. He was born and raised in Loyal Hill, attended Elliott, lived on Hermitage Road, Devon Spring Road, and he is a community giant. And unfortunately, he got in an accident last year.
Associate, please.
And passed away earlier this week. He has survived by many children, many family members, and an entire community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, Mr. Terrell would like to be associated with those remarks. MP Terrell. Any further speakers?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, so would I.
And MP Vance Campbell would like to be associated with remarks.
And MP Michael Weeks, Mr. Speaker.
And Weeks for Mr. Reed. Thank you, members. Any further speakers? Okay. The next item is matters of privilege. There are none. There are no personal explanations. Notice of motion for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance. There are none. Introduction of bills. I think Mr. Ravane, the Premier, government bills.
Good morning again, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm introducing the following bill for its first reading so that it be placed on the order paper for the next meeting, the Gaming Amendment Act 2021.
Thank you, Honorable Premier. And the next is Ms. Tanae Burbett, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am introducing the following bill for its first reading so that it may be placed on the order paper for the next day of the meeting. Human Rights Amendment Act 2021.
Thank you, Minister Furbert. The next is the Honorable Lawrence Scott.
Yes, good day, Mr. Speaker. I'm introducing the following bill for its first reading so that it may be placed on the order paper for the next day of meeting. Marine and Port Service Amendment Act 2021.
Thank you. There are no opposition bills, no private members bills, no notice of motion. Orders of the day are at that point. The first order we have is the consideration of the tourism investment order to 2021. Premier. Premier Byrne.
Mr. Speaker, I move that Standing Order 23 be suspended to enable the House to proceed with the consideration of the order entitled Tourism Investment Nautilus Order 2021, proposed to be made by the Minister responsible for tourism, with a written agreement of the Minister of Finance in exercise of power conferred by Section 5 of the Tourism Investment Act 2017.
Any objections? Declare to be done. Continue. Honorable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the purpose of Tourism Investment Nautilus Hotel Order 2021 is to permit the grant of tax relief to developers investing in the tourism fund, Nautilus Hotel Atlantic Hotel Limited, which is in the national economic interest of Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, honorable members recall the Tourism Investment Act 2017, which I'll refer to going forward as the Act, which became operative in November 2017. The primary objective of the Act is to make Bermuda more attractive to foreign investors and to incentivize and assist local tourism-related business owners to reinvest in their product. The Tourism Investment Act provides a scale of tax relief that can be accessed by developers through the grant of an order approved by this House, and that scale ranges for relief from 1 year to 10 years. By way of background, Mr. Speaker, the Nautilus property located at 88 South Road, Warwick, is an adjunct to the Azura Hotel Residences located at 19 South Road, Warwick. The Church Bay Trust Company Limited, licensed trust corporation, trustee of the Nautilus Trust, acquired the property on January 10th, 2021, and is the sole shareholder in the Atlantic Hotel Limited. The trust submitted an application for a tourism investment order on behalf of the Atlantic Hotel Limited on March 25th, 2021, requesting the maximum full 10-year exemption available under the law. The Nautilus property consists of 1.97 acres and is substantially zoned tourism, with the remainder being residential too. The Nautilus property was acquired in order to serve as an expansion to Project Azura, which has now been substantially developed by the principals of Church Bay Trust Company Limited. The intent is to develop the Nautilus property in 2 phases. Phase 1A would redevelop the existing Nautilus main house into 3 units, creating between 20 to 24 new units. Phase 1B would renovate the remainder of the existing Nautilus house and infrastructure, creating additional hotel-quality amenities, including, but not limited to, landscaping, lighting, roadways, and a new saltwater pool. The lower floors of the existing residence building will be renovated to create 2 additional hotel residences, a total of 6 hotel keys or suites. Phase 2 will consist of the creation of 20 additional hotel residences, 9 2-bedroom suites, and 11 3-bedroom suites. The total hotel inventory will include a potential maximum of 60 new or like new keys, with a minimum of 24 keys if each owner only commits 1 mandatory key or suite. Mr. Speaker, the Trust has committed $3.5 million to the acquisition of the subject property and a further $250,000 into closing costs. The construction costs of phases 1A and 1B estimated to be $3 million, and phase 2 of $18.5 million. The total budget for project costs, including acquisition, renovation, professional fees, transaction costs, reserves, and working capital, is estimated at $28 million. Mr. Speaker, in meeting the criteria for a new hotel, following consideration of the Governor of Bermuda, this order provides for the Nautilus property to receive, in summary, full relief from customs duty for a period of 6 years from the commencement of this order, full exemption from hotel occupancy tax for a period of 6 years from the hotel's opening date, exemption from the employer's share of payroll tax for a period of 6 years from the hotel's opening date, subject to annual verification of a management training program for Bermuda, and full exemption from land tax for 1 year, starting 6 years after the hotel's operating date, subject to verification that the hotel employs 70% Bermuda staff and ending on the first anniversary of that date. Mr. Speaker, it is forecast that 100 to 150 construction jobs will be engaged during the 3 to 4 year development process of the Nautilus site. A similar number of jobs were created during the Azura development. The Nautilus development will also result in additional 25 plus jobs of varying duration in support of the development's design, engineering, financial, legal, and associated disciplines. Upon completion of Nautilus, the combined Azura-Nautilus resort is expected to provide approximately 80 hospitality jobs. Mr. Speaker, this is welcome news and signals a strong vote of confidence in Bermuda's tourism and represents another product offering in support of rebuilding of the industry. Mr. Speaker, this government is well aware of the challenges ahead for our island. However, our collective successful management of the pandemic has steered Bermuda in a good place. The government, the commitment and confidence demonstrated by the Atlantic Hotel Limited is recognized and deeply appreciated. Bermuda cannot rest on its past laurels, and the constant renewal of our hotel product is critical, and this investment order will help significantly in achieving this end. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Premier. Any further speakers?
Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Continue.
Yes, I want to thank the Premier for the briefing that he's given us. As I look at this is a very positive thing to see that we continue to see many of these projects, especially knowing that when we were the government, this was an opportunity that we took to extend and expand on the Azure. And now to see that under this government, that those expansions continue to happen. So I'm glad to see that the government has been working along with the team there to ensure that expansion in this tourism industry continues to happen. It was good to also hear a briefing on exactly the kinds of monies that we spent, almost a total of about $28 million spent from the briefing that will be put into the economy, which is always a welcome thing. From the briefing, however, I wasn't quite sure if the Premier said March 25th that they put in for concessions, and so based on that, hopefully he correct me with March or January. I think he said March 25th they put in for concessions, and just based on that briefing he gave, I was just wondering and curious as to here we are now, many months later, and putting in for this convention, standing order spending and we're doing all this in one go. So I was hoping that the Premier would have given us an idea or an explanation as to why we're racing here to get such done when much of this was taking place back starting in January of 2021 and then March of 25th. So it'd be good if the Premier could explain to us why we're coming to the House at this last minute to get this done. I am grateful that we are getting it done, but it would have been nice to have at least some heads up. I also took note of what the Premier was saying as far as some of those concessions are concerned. And interestingly enough, it looks as if the government has expanded on the concessions, adding, based on what we did in the beginning as a government, offering 5 years extension. It looks like we're adding maybe 6 years to some of these concessions, and I was just curious as to some of why we were doing that as well. What led to the changing or the precedents that was made in the past? But outside of that, Deputy Speaker, I'm glad that the Minister is bringing this. It's good news for Bermuda, and we want to thank once again Nautilus Azura for expanding on this particular area and helping us to expand the hotel industry. So those are my brief remarks. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member Kenya. Are there any further speakers?
Yes,
Mr. Swan, Honorable Member.
yes, Mr. Acting Speaker, I would like to echo the support of this continued development on what has been traditionally called Bermuda's Gold Coast, and congratulate Azura and Mr. John Bush, who is no stranger to development. Mr. Acting Speaker, right down there in your neighborhood of Topper's Top, he was very instrumental in the development of the Topper's Point Club, which would have had its origins with the Progressive Labour Party government. even before the Azure came on the table. And the model that he has created through his years of experience in the industry is one that is working well. And so the relationship that is being fostered by a progressive Labour Party government at this particular time is a carry-on from a relationship that would have been established even prior to the initiation of the very successful Azure. And we thank the former speaker, the former premier, who recognized the continuation of the Azure under a prior administration as well. I would encourage, Mr. Acting Speaker, anyone in Bermuda who enjoys a good hotel product to pay the Azure visit and to see the way in which the great architecture has been created, something that stood out in my mind, and I'm sure it would carry forward into the Northerners building, which is just to the west, a little bit even more elevated than the Azure property. There, the Northerners that's going to be a part of it is a eco-friendly portion which featured a rooftop that was near the ocean that was covered in Bermuda foliage, bay grapes and the like, and it also provided a bit of eco-friendly and also electric vehicles, which the owners, and there's a combination of ownership and leaseback facilities that allow the hotel product to function more economically and effectively. But if anyone knows how loud a vehicle could be, a bike and the like, coming back maybe from a late night, there are certain areas where only electric vehicles and the quietness that they provide will be traveling through those areas there. And I thought that was an outstanding feature and great thoughtfulness to moving forward in a more conservation conscious manner. But I'm sure that Premier bringing the recommended concessions, that every effort will be made to make it possible for the success, because the success that tourism brings is the success that allows us to employ greater numbers of communities. So certainly supportive of the training aspect, and I'll declare my interest, Mr. Acting Speaker, as a member of the Bermuda Entertainment Union, and we look forward to some great Bermuda artists having just another venue to perform at, and sending out a shout out to our sister Baba, our Entertainment Union president, and all our young entertainers coming who are looking forward to availing themselves to these increased opportunities in emerging products that are growing out of our vision to provide not only great tourism products, but also experiences in support of these products with the help of the Bermuda Tourism Authority and the BTA's experience segment of the organization. So in support of this, Mr. Acting Speaker, you would know our passion of the tourism industry, and you well before me, having grown out of that industry and been very much a part of it all of our lives. So thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker, for the opportunity to support this.
Thank you, Honorable Member Swan. Are there any further speakers?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
And the Speaker recognizes the Honorable Coles Diamonds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I begin by stating that I support this development, and I also should indicate that I have an interest, and that my family property homestead right across the street from this hotel development. Bring that up. Speaker, I have, as I said, supported, but I just have a question that I would like for the tourism minister slash premier to address. I note that the hotel concession for the former Surfside Beach Club Order 216 was granted for 5 years, and this one for the similar sister organization is granted for 6 years. So the minister can provide this reason for the increase in 6 years. I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just asking for clarification as to why they increased it to 6 years. The other issue that I'd like to address is the concession. If you refer to the previous Surfside one, you will note that the exemptions for the hotel occupancy and the payroll tax exemptions and the hotel tax occupancy tax exemptions were linked to other services that will benefit Bermuda. For example, it said the hotel occupancy tax was linked to marketing of the hotel. And so if the developer or the managers of the Northeast Hotel and the Azura spent $100,000 in marketing of the hotel, which will benefit you, that will offset some of the exemption granted on the hotel occupancy tax. So I'd like for the minister to speak to why that is not included in the concession act. The same thing applies to the hotel occupancy. The previous act for the sister company says exemption from hotel occupancy tax otherwise payable in respect of the hotel for an amount equal to the sum expended by the hotel for entertainment. Again, that was for our entertainment industry, and it was not a requirement under this concession. So I'm just asking the minister why. And the same applies to the payroll tax. You can offset some of the exemption by the inclusion of training Bermudians in the hotel. It was included and clearly defined in the act with quantifiable assessments for each of the years of each exemption. Can the minister please provide his reasoning for not running a similar exemption program as was done for the sister property that was the former Surfside Beach under Order 2016? But generally speaking, Mr. Speaker, I think what they've done in Morgan and in Zora is first class. It's peacefully done. I've been there many, many times. The environment is friendly, and so you have my support. I do have concern in regards to the number of units that focus, but I reserve further judgment on that until after I see the plan. Because it's not a large problem, and I know that they're going to have approximately 26 units on that property, 24 units, and 50 to 60 keys. And so there will be a lot of traffic in that area. So I do have reservations, but I will reserve judgment until I have more details and can see what the master plan is. As I said, I'm concerned about the environmental impact as well as the increased traffic in the area. So those are my comments, but generally I would say that the tourism investment of this hotel has my investment, and I just like to have more clarity as to why we have dissimilar hotel concessions orders for staying companies. And but I understand
Thank you, Honorable Member Simons. Are there any further speakers?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Dunkley, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'm also pleased to support my colleagues and members of the House today in this legislation that we're looking at here in regards to the development on the South Shore, on Gold Coast, as it was referred to earlier. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, I think we need to just reflect a bit and understand just how difficult it has been for developments to take place over time. And a lot of the various mechanisms, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that both political parties, when they've been in government, have tried to enact to make them be successful. And so we're delighted here today to come to this honorable chamber at a special session and support it because the origins of this property in Missouri certainly were very difficult as we reflect back. I don't think many members of the public are aware, or even members of Parliament are aware of this, Deputy Speaker, but when I was the Premier, Mr. Bush approached me in total exasperation in not being able to move this project forward. We sat down, we brought other people in the room, and we made sure that we could get this off the ground, and now we see the fruits of that labor taking place. And I was blessed, along with colleagues, to be at the opening of the resort, I guess, a couple of years ago. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, as you might be aware, and certainly as the opposition leader who spoke just before me is well aware, it's a stunning property. Just about every view that you look is amazing, and the next one is even better than the last one. It's a stunning property, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I am pleased to see the success that is actually taking place there. They have a model that appears to work. They have a model that appears to be successful, and so I don't believe anyone in the House today is agreeing in any way for coming back for a special session to deal with this legislation, because time is of the essence as we move forward. I think it's also appropriate to say, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that we must appreciate, as I reflected on earlier, we must appreciate the frustration that many developers have to go through in getting things done. And certainly when you're in the hospitality industry, when you're in building properties where people will come and visit, we need to certainly accept that nothing is easy nowadays because of the cost of doing business in Bermuda and because of the competition that these people face from all over the world. And so I want to commend the government today for bringing this piece here, because it's progress in a very difficult environment. And we need to continue to try to make that progress in a very difficult environment, because quite often in today's world, certainly when you factor in the pandemic that seems to continue to grip parts of the world more strongly than others, it's a statement that my father would always say: you snooze, you lose. We have to take an opportunity when it knocks. We have to do the best that we can. And so I have no issue in supporting this today, and I wish them all the success as they develop a sister property right there. Certainly, as colleagues have referred to, Mr. Bush has a history of wanting to support Bermuda, not only in the east end of the island, but now he's working his way up to the west end of the island, and this is good to see. And let's build on this successful model. He's done it with concessions, which we know have to be tweaked from time to time, so we can ensure that people are successful with those, but he didn't get a special development order. He hasn't had any guarantee, and it appears that this model is working. So congratulations to them. Congratulations to the government for getting it done. They have our support in the opposition. And to the people of Bermuda, this will show that quite often governments do work together. So let's not always focus on the negative. Let's focus on the positive. Let's make this one work. And with the success of this development, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is the last thing I will say. This will give the opportunity for more Bermudians to get back to work, to seek gainful employment, and that's important. So thank you for your time, Deputy Speaker, and we support this and look forward to continued success. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member, Mr. Dunkley. Are there any further speakers? Okay, Premier.
you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the support of Honorable College. I'm not entirely certain where there's this conversation regarding the special session. This is a regular scheduled session of the House of Assembly, so I'm not sure where the special session matter is coming from. But what I will say is that I am grateful for the support of members allowing this to be moved today before we come back in September. Because the fact is that, as we all know, this government is committed to economic recovery and committed to providing the conditions for jobs to be created. And a delay of 6 weeks is a delay of 6 weeks employment per person. And we are not trying to delay employment, so we are trying to
Point of clarification
as possible, methodical as possible.
Premier, just 1 second. It's a point of clarification. Would you allow?
I don't need to do Mr. Speaker. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you.
I thank the Honorable Premier for his indulgence. The reason why I said special, when I could have chosen a different word, was last week was supposed to be the last session of Parliament. And so today was an extra sitting, and we're happy to come back for this extra sitting. We're happy to come back in.
That's not correct.
Continue, Mr. Honorable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the honorable member is incorrect. The schedule that was submitted to the opposition and the schedule that was submitted was always that for meeting on this day, the 23rd the 23rd of July. So this is not a special sitting. This is the day that we were always scheduled to sit on the Friday before you see, Mr. Speaker, I'm wearing my red today.
Well, what can I say?
I got it. That much being said, Mr. Speaker. So it is not a special sitting. It is a regularly scheduled sitting. But I'm grateful that we're able to advance this matter today, and grateful for the support of members of the opposition. There's just a few things in which I'd like to say, because I know that a number of questions have been asked. The first thing I'd like to say is that I think that it's important to recognize that though the Northwest property is on the same adjacent noting that the Northwest property is adjacent to the property which was the former Surfside Zero. I think it is important that the honorable opposition leader recognize that the concessions in which were given are under two separate acts, and they are two different acts. So the hotel concessions order that was given by the former government under the old Hotel Concessions Act is a different order than this, and there are different provisions inside of the Hotel Concessions Act and the Tourism Investment Act. So I think it's important. So when they're saying, what about the differences that exist in one or the other, I think that it's important to recognize that they are two different acts. And so there are two different provisions which are there. Concessions under the Hotel Concessions Act are a different act, and hotels in the Tourism Investment Order are under a different Tourism Investment Act are different. And so in this case, Mr. Speaker, there are two separate properties, and the concessions that existed previously under the hotel concessions for the actual former Surfside property or the Zero property still stand and are still maintained. These concessions are for the separate development, the separate development over on the northwest side. So there is the concessions which existed before have not disappeared. Those exist for the Azura side. And on the tourism investment, this is specifically for the additional development, additional units which are being used to add to additional hotel needs for the property. So they do work in tandem as it is an overall development, but it's important to note that that is why the concessions. So it is not as though if there's not tax concessions for making sure there is Bermuda entertainment that will take place at the Azura Hotel. That is still completed. That is not invalidated by this act. And the honorable member from position number 2 spoke about the importance of Bermuda entertainment and the importance of promotion of Bermuda inside the industry. And that is what this government is committed to and is continued to be committed to. But it's important to note that they are two separate acts. And so this is an order under the Tourism Investment Act.
Continue.
Yeah, Premier. Couldn't hear you, Premier.
Okay. How much do you hear, Mrs. Speaker?
We got 7 minutes.
I'm sorry. How much do you hear, Mrs. Speaker?
I didn't hear you.
Okay, got it.
What about the last 30 seconds?
Oh, we lost the last 30 seconds. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what I'm saying is that
these concessions are not cookie cutter, and you have to examine them based upon the circumstances that exist. I would have said in my brief, the developers requested a full 10-year exemption. The government examined what we're looking at, and with the cabinet and the Minister of Finance decided that 6 years more appropriate. We have to have a delicate balance between what it is that we're doing insofar as economic development and what it is that we're doing insofar as revenue. Because any revenue foregone is money that is not coming to the Treasury that could pay for other matters. So it's certainly important to provide employment opportunities. It's certainly important to provide hotel development in Bermuda. It's certainly important to make sure we upgrade our amenities and we offer for our tourism. But it's also important that we balance and take a balanced approach to these matters. And so we examine these things on a case-by-case basis. And on this case, the government decided that this was what was most appropriate given the circumstances. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I do believe that I have answered the questions of which have been put forward. And I move that the said draft order be approved and a suitable message be sent to Her Excellency the Governor.
Any objections to this order being approved? There appear to be none. This order is approved and will be sent to Ms. Excellency, her Excellency, Governor. As it is 12:25, I think we will break to lunch at this time and return at 2 o'clock. So the House stands adjourned for lunch.